The world knows John Lennon as a talented songwriter and visionary. But he wasn't just a mop-topped British rock and roller. John Winston Lennon was a legendary activist and profound intellectual that changed not only an industry and a generation, but the world. Forever. On October 9, 1940, during the height of World War II, high school sweethearts Alfred and Julia Lennon gave birth to their only son. They named him John Winston Lennon. The middle name Winston was given after British Prime Minister Churchill. After John was born, his father, who had been an orphan as a child, went back to work as a seaman. For years, Julia and John didn't hear from Fred, so eventually his mother found a new man. Since she wanted to start a new life, she sent John to live with his aunt and uncle. At the end of the war, when John was 5, his father visited him and invited him to come to New Zealand. John refused. Instead, he stayed with his Aunt Mimi and Uncle George. They soon realized they had their hands full with Lennon's rebellious nature. He stole, got into fights, and was suspected of being the leader of a schoolboy gang. Though he was a troublemaker, John did well in some subjects, especially art. He attracted many friends with his sense of humor, but he also acted cruel towards people because of the unhappiness he carried inside him. When John was 14, his Uncle George passed away from a brain hemorrhage. By the time he was 16, Lennon was spending more time with his mother and becoming interested in music. He begged his aunt to get him a guitar. She finally gave in, though she insisted he'd never get anywhere with it. In a matter of a few years, Lennon had gone from having dreams of being an artist at Liverpool Art College to becoming an aspiring musician. He started his first band called the Quarrymen with some mates from Liverpool. They played in local joints, but never became real celebrities. That is, until John Lennon and fellow Quarryman Paul McCartney formed the Beatles in 1960. In 1964, the Beatles LP, Meet the Beatles, was released in the US, and the mania began. In the UK, the Beatles released more than 40 different singles, albums, and EPs that reached number 1. Though the Beatles were a rock band, John Lennon wasn't just the Beatles' songwriter. He was a man with his own life and dreams. During the height of Beatlemania, John married his 5-year girlfriend Cynthia Powell on August 23, 1962. 6 years later, they were divorced. Cynthia claims their marriage was ruined due to physical abuse, infidelities, jealousy, and LSD. They had one son named Julian, whom John was never really close to. Since 1959, the Vietnam War had been raging on in Vietnam. Many other countries were involved in the conflict. People all over the world opposed the war. Advocates of the peace movement urged U.S. forces to withdraw from Vietnam to decrease human bloodshed and let North and South Vietnam work out their problems without foreign influence. Two of the many peace movement supporters were John Lennon and his new wife Yoko Ono. He even changed his middle name from Winston to Ono to show how he did not approve of modern politics. His marriage to Yoko was controversial all over the world, but that didn't seem to bother them, as the couple soon became an international symbol of support for world peace and essentially hippies. One of the most epic displays of John and Yoko's activism for peace was the Bed-In for Peace, where the song Give Peace a Chance was recorded in front of a live audience of celebrities and journalists in room 1742 at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal, Canada. By this time, the world was finding the Beatles to be a bit strange, releasing songs like I Am the Walrus. They had simply grown apart. The Beatles ended in 1970. Through those last few years before the breakup, John continued to be a self-proclaimed pacifist and made many adventures, such as planting 2 acorns for world peace outside of the Coventry Cathedral and appearing on stage together with Yoko Ono in a large white bag, though it can be argued as to the message of this. After a few years, John settled down in New York and wrote even more solo hits such as Imagine and Instant Karma. He still held strong political views, much to the disapproval of both his Aunt Mimi and much of the population, as represented in his argument with BBC reporter Gloria Emerson in 1969. Emerson told him in her haughty upper-class voice, "You've made yourself ridiculous." "I don't care," Lennon replied, "if it saves lives." John was now opposed to all war and violence. He believed by using his fame to make people think about peace, he was doing something better than just making more and more money. In 1975, Yoko Ono gave birth to John's second son, Sean. Lennon made a promise to be closer to his second son than his first. He was. Until...
Mr. Lennon?
Good evening. If you've been anywhere near a television set or a radio these past few hours, you already know that John Lennon of the Beatles is dead. He was shot late this evening in front of his apartment building in New York City. Apparently, he was killed almost immediately. The man who shot John Lennon walked up to the musician as he was leaving his limousine.
One of the most famous men in the world steps out of his car. "I'm shot," were his last words before he died of 5 fatal gunshots. Mark David Chapman had just shot and killed John Lennon. And even to today, John Lennon still holds a legacy as a symbol of the righteous and a believer in dreams.